Hey there guys, welcome back. This week we are going to jump on the bandwagon a little bit. Now it seems every time I look at an article from Standard or Block, I'm seeing some kind of white X token deck. I think that it's the popular thing to do, so we're going to check it out this week. We do have a couple of token decks available to us. One is very popular, though you may not think of it first and foremost as a token deck, and that would be Storm. Storm generates this whole idea where you're putting out a whole bunch of 1/1 goblin tokens to overwhelm your opponent. It's kind of a generic weenie aggro strategy, but it uses tokens instead of creatures. So any kind of token deck that you do run into is going to try and hopefully do the same thing. They want to generate a whole bunch of little 1/1 tokens and overwhelm the opponent. Now we do have a green-white deck that is very popular for tokens. It has seen kind of an odd increase recently. Not sure why that is, but you can go check out the article, puremtgo.com. I have posted up a deck list there for that. I'm not going to talk about that one this week. I have something else in mind. So that one works on this idea of using Essence Wardens to generate a whole bunch of life while putting out a whole bunch of Sapperling tokens and using them to overwhelm your opponents. Now, this week, we are going to take a look at a different green-white token generating deck for Pauper. This is a deck that is called MidnightPresence by me. Deck is not by me, the name is what I call it. Hopefully that makes sense. This deck actually was something that did show up in a daily event a while ago, maybe a couple of months at this point, and I did not catch the name, so I do apologize. I do not have the person to credit this to, but this is not something, clarify that, not something I've put together. This is actually something someone else has, and I really liked it, and I want to talk about tokens, so we're going to take a look at it. The combination, for those who do not know, came about during Dark Ascension. Now, that was about the first time that I had noticed or seen this green-white Sapperling token deck, the one I just generically called green-white tokens on my competitive reports. Now, that had come out about the same time as Midnight Guard, and it seemed like a great option for working in this combination, because it was in color. Now, the combination, for those who do not know, Midnight Guard was, again, printed in Dark Ascension. It is a 2/3 creature for 3, and that's kind of relatively even for cost to power ratio. But what makes this guy special is this ability here. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield, you can untap the Midnight Guard. So what happens here is you combine this with Presence of Gond, and Presence of Gond here is an enchantment aura that gives a creature the ability to tap and put a 1/1 elf token onto the battlefield. So how this works out is pretty simple. You get Midnight Guard into play after it loses Summoning Sickness so that you can enchant it with Presence of Gond and tap it. And when it's tapped, it generates a 1/1 warrior token, elf warrior token. And when that token enters the battlefield, it triggers the ability for Midnight Guard, which untaps it, and it allows you to retap it for another token. Again, the new token untaps Midnight Guard, and this can go on infinitely until you want to stop it. This is a combination that we have seen, this kind of infinite token thing in Modern, with stuff like the Kiki Goblin. I'm not going to attempt to say his whole name because it's going to make me sound silly. But anyways, so the whole point of the deck is these two cards here, and they work on this infinite generation. So when this card was spoiled, when we had first seen the Midnight Guard, I had, of course, wanted to throw it into the green-white deck. But what I found is the green-white deck is pretty well set in what it does, and by throwing in this extra combination to that deck, you've kind of slowed it down a little bit. The main focus doesn't really lose out on anything. It still generates a whole bunch of tokens with that, and you're just wasting 4 card spots, because I didn't really want to push beyond 2 of each for the Guard and the Presence. If you push it up to 8 of each, then you're really cutting back on the other cards in the deck, and like I said, the deck already has kind of a big focus to it already. So you can find room for it, but what you're basically doing is just making it weaker. When you're running this combination in that deck as just a 2 of each, you run into this situation where it's there, it's not a focus. If you come into it, great. If not, you don't miss it. And that's well and good, but you can instead drop those 4 cards and kind of round out your focus strategy in the first place. So this was a deck that I had seen that actually focuses entirely on this 2-card combination right here and protects it, brings things out that way. And I thought that was great. I thought it was a great idea. You can see in a second here when I go over these cards what a real better focus it gives you. So this right here is, hopefully you can see this in the video, the package of protection for your combo, basically. I guess maybe we'll bring this one down too. What the deck does really well is protect Midnight Guard. Now, white does have a couple of options for reanimation, but they're really not very good. Any kind of decent reanimation is in black. So if the Midnight Guard dies 4 times, you've lost all 4 copies, and you cannot combo off, basically. So you need the Midnight Guard to live. Now, there's a couple of ways this is going to happen. The first is this package of Standard Bearers and Coalition Honor Guard. Now, this is absolutely troublesome to have in the main deck, and it is fantastic. I love it. Standard Bearer is a great card, and Coalition Honor Guard, and they have the same ability that when a targeted spell, a creature targeted spell, is cast, it has to target one of these cards first. So what ends up happening is, say your opponent casts something like Doomblade. If you have Standard Bearer on the field, the Doomblade can't target Midnight Guard, it has to target Standard Bearer. So 1 Standard Bearer and 1 Midnight Guard on the field means your opponent needs to have 2 targeted kill spells in order to get to that Midnight Guard, which grants you a bit of a card advantage. What else happens here is things like Lightning Bolt can't really be played if you have Coalition Honor Guard on the field because it's got a 4 toughness. If they try and Lightning Bolt your Midnight Guard, it's got to target the Honor Guard first, and the Honor Guard is big enough to withstand that, so they're going to need 2 burn spells to get past the 4 toughness of Coalition Honor Guard, and then a 3rd to get the Midnight Guard, and that's great card advantage there as well. Another great thing to come out of this is, I imagine this deck in general is pretty good against Stompy. I really think that might be a good matchup, but I haven't played it, so I can't justify that 100%. Just my initial thoughts on the deck and whatnot and playing it. So, if your opponent has something, say, Hunger of the Howlpack, that is a creature-targeted spell, and so you have Standard Bearer on the field, he has to target Standard Bearer with that. So whereas he has his, maybe 2/1 Young Wolf, something just died, and all of a sudden he's like, yes, this is great, I'm going to pump it up, and he casts that, but unfortunately he has to realize that it only targets Standard Bearer. If you actually, I know it's kind of a rogue deck, but if you come across any of the enchant aggro decks, the enchantments will have to target your bearers and honor guards as well. So I think it's pretty cool. You do have to watch out for things like Mono Black Control because they do run edicts in great form and large quantity. So edicts will target persons, and you have to persons. It will target people, targets players, and you will have to choose a creature to sacrifice. Hopefully you can get around that because you have a lot of kind of small creatures, and you can pick something other than the Midnight Guard. But if they get too many or they get a pretty good draw, then you might be in trouble. Just something to be aware of. Now the next part of the combination kind of to protect Midnight Guard is this set here. It runs 8 of these effects. Ghostly Possession is something that also came out in Innistrad block, and Heart of Light is something we've had for a while. Now these are both enchant auras for 2 and a white, and they work on this concept of preventing damage dealt to enchanted creature. Ghostly Possession does, and keep this in mind, Ghostly Possession specifically says combat damage, whereas Heart of Light just says damage. So what you can do is use these in an offensive and defensive manner. On an offensive manner, your opponent gets something big and nasty out. Say you didn't have a bearer down, he got that Hunger of the Howlpack off, and now you're sitting across from an 8/8 creature. Then you can put Heart of Light or Ghostly Possession down, and it becomes, a wall. And it's not something you have to worry about anymore. On a defensive side, you have a couple of different options. You can use that obviously on Midnight Guard to prevent any kind of damage done to it through combat. More importantly, during the red decks, the burn decks, you have to put down this on there, and it prevents damage. You have to make sure you use Heart of Light though, because Lightning Bolt can get through Ghostly Possession again because it's combat damage. So it's not great for defending Midnight Guard, but it does have some uses. What it is most importantly for is the combination it runs with these 2 guys right here. The deck runs 4 copies of Palace Guard and Wall of Glare. Now this is a nice secondary combo. I call it a secondary combo because it will not win you the game, but it can absolutely screw an opponent, especially in an aggro strategy. And what you do is you put one of these onto those guys so that all combat damage is prevented to them. And these 2 guys here are basically walls that can block any number of creatures. Palace Guard is a 1/4, the Wall of Glare is a 0/5. So you get that wall down, it can block any number of creatures, and it takes no damage. Yeah, that sounds pretty overpowered to me. So that's a great combination to keep in mind as well. Again, very, very good against aggro decks. Even, oh man, if you can get that down, if you manage to survive against Storm long enough to get Wall of Glare down, Wall of Glare plus Ghostly Possession, it's pretty possible. The odds of it happening are really nice because Wall of Glare comes down at that 2 cost. So if you can just make it to turn 2 and get that Wall of Glare down, you at least stand a good chance against the Empty the Warrens part of the Storm. Anyways, that's a side thought. You could even use, I guess you can use Standard Bearer plus Heart of Light against the Grape Shot, if you can make it that far. I think. I don't know. I would have to check it out in game. I don't want to say it for sure because I'm not 100%. And you can feel free to correct me in the comments on that one. I know I had thought of something, some kind of combination I thought was great against stopping the what's it called, the Grape Shot combo, sorry, and it turned out it didn't work the way I thought, so I'll let you comment on that. But anyways, we have this whole package here of things to protect the Midnight Guard, and that's fantastic. Now, the Presence of Gond is a little bit easier to replace. If this gets removed, you do get Tragic Poet, which will get that back from your graveyard. This is a 1/1 for 1 that has an ability for tap, sacrifice, and return target enchantment from your graveyard to your hand. When I first saw this deck list, I did have to look that up because I honestly had not seen Tragic Poet. Is not something that has seen a lot of play. I know I wasn't around during Urza Saga, so maybe it had play there, but very cool card. So that basically what it'll give you is 8 chances to get Presence of Gond to stick, which is great. Now, this is something that you have to definitely be careful of. You have to know where things are. Naturalize is something you're going to run into a lot. A lot of times, Affinity is a thing right now. So a lot of decks will run, of course, artifact removal in their sideboard. Lucky for us, a lot of it is red. Izzet Post is very popular. Goblins not so popular, but you do see Goblins, you do see red deck wins out there. Now, the great thing about those is when it comes to red, they get a lot of great artifact removal, but it is just specifically artifact removal. Any kind of spell that removes artifact and enchantment is going to be either white or it's going to be green, stuff like Naturalize and Disenchant. A lot of the mono white decks do not run Disenchant, it's too generic. They will run stuff like Dust to Dust because it removes more artifacts. And like I said, Affinity is a thing, so you have to worry about that. But enchantments really aren't a problem at all. So I think you can get away with running something like this in the current metagame pretty well. So, your odds are that when you face something like Stompy or something like that, if they do have a naturalized type effect where it gets rid of both, at the very least, they're only probably running 3 in their sideboard. So, giving you 8 chances to get Presence of Gond to stick, those are pretty good odds, as opposed to 3 copies of Naturalize in a 60-card deck. So that works out really well. Now, the last thing I guess to talk about here is Radiant Judgment. Radiant's Judgment is a great card. It kills any creature target power 4 or greater. Now, this won't happen a lot. This is something you can use to remove things like, again, Hunger the Howlpack, making something out of hand. It can be used on Crushers as well during the post matchups. Actually, a lot of times you don't necessarily come into them for power. It can remove the mirrors. Trying to think what else. Aaron Ephemerin can be removed. That's something I've seen oddly a lot recently on these mono blue control decks. So you have some options, but there are a lot of times where it's just going to be useless. Say for example Mono Black Control. Mono Black Control does not run anything that is typically a 4-power creature, so you can use it for the cycling ability. I was a little unsure of this, but the more I thought about it, the more I understand why it's in there. It is giving you some removal options. A lot of this stuff is just damage prevention through Ghostly Possession and Heart of Light, but Radiant's Judgment is a permanent removal option. Now, you can use something like Exile. It's about the same casting cost, but what you really gain in Radiant's Judgment is the cycling ability. Being able to draw cards against a matchup where you know that you're not going to be facing anything with a 4-power is nice to be able to draw those cards. It also gives you a pretty easy choice for something to sideboard out in the game 2 and 3. It's very important. I don't think I can stress enough the ability to study the metagame before you play. If you want to be a serious competitor, you really need to know the deck lists, and you don't have to know them inside and out and how they work. Just a generic idea of what their key cards are, what their deck list is going to typically look like, and hopefully you can get an idea of that just looking at daily results. So that covers this here. Mana base is a little interesting as well. Very low on the forest, obviously, because the only green cards in the deck are the Presence of Gone. Even 4 seems a little bit much at times. I can easily see you suggesting taking the forests down to 3 and upping the plains count by 1. The interesting side of it is, of course, going to be the Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic. That is an interesting thing because of the fact that it is running a full copy of both of those. This obviously, I'm a big fan of thinning out the deck. It helps you search out the 1 green that you need. Anytime after you get 1 green, you can probably get away with just using plains after that. And what's kind of great about this is the fact that when you're searching lands out, usually you don't want to run 8 of these cards because of the fact that it comes into play tapped. Usually if you're running a deck, 2 colors and aggro and stuff like that, you want to be a little bit faster on the clock. I talk about clocking the deck, and what I'm referring to is how fast the deck performs, how fast you can kind of get yourself settled, get big creatures on the field, get yourself in an advantageous place. Advantageous place. I think that's the word. Either way, what you want to do is, get yourself set up, and Pauper's actually a surprisingly fast format. I think people might underestimate that if they're not familiar and just say, oh, it's an all-common format, it can't be that fast, but it really can be. So, this deck actually, you can make it to the mid to late game thanks to all the standard bearers and the things like Heart of Light. And so getting that a little bit slower land is not going to be terrible for you. It's something you can definitely survive around. Let's take a look real quick also at the sideboard here. So, mostly white, of course. I guess having these 4 Sandstorms in here is probably the reasoning for forests going up to a 4 count. Sandstorm is, of course, one of the green's best options for dealing with kind of the weenies, the storms and whatnot, dealing 1 damage to each attacking creature. I guess it'll give you an opportunity to kill off a couple of things, even with 1 damage off of something like Palace Guard. But I think that's pretty standard. We also have 3 copies of Disenchant. Obviously, you can use that for the affinity matchups. It's a great thing to have. Dust to Dust, again, is a really great option. I think it's probably not ran here because of the fact that it does require a double white. And this is kind of what I was talking about with Infect. A lot of decks are similar. When you're running a sideboard, you don't... a lot of times they will run 3 ofs a card for the ability to fit more options into their sideboard. Running a full set of 4 is not as favorable in instances, so getting around 3 Naturalizes or 3 Disenchants is something that can be easy to do. The deck also brings in 2 copies of Coalition Honor Guard. This is, if you're facing a deck that has a lot of control options, a lot of targeted kill, stuff like that, you can bring in the Coalition Honor Guards, and it gives something to, get past. Also, I think it could be advantageous against things like Is It Post. Standard Bearer is great. It's, a cheaper option against Coalition Honor Guard. It costs twice as much to get the Honor Guard into play, but what it does do is get past things like Lightning Bolt. And if you play against things like Is It Post and Goblins, and you have those burn spells where majority of it's going to be Lightning Bolts and not get past that 4 damage, maybe bringing in an Honor Guard or 2 would be a good option. I know Is It Post does get Flame Slash, and that can get around it, but... Just go with me on this one. You also get great stuff here for the another kind of a typical white weenie option for the sideboard is the Crimson Acolyte and the Obsidian Acolytes, and these 2 can definitely be tough. Mono black control, I know I've faced the Obsidian Acolyte, and it's like nothing you can do against it. It can sit there as an unlimited blocker. Hopefully you can find a good opportunity to Edict it, but it can just sit there and attack through and attack through and attack through. It gives all of your other creatures protection, and just it's very tough to deal with. We'll put it that way. I think another interesting choice here is 2 copies of Sandskin, and this basically, we talked about the 8 copies we have main deck of this effect with Heart of Light and Ghostly Possession, and Sandskin is yet another. Sandskin is a card that was printed earlier, and this works kind of similar to Ghostly Possession in the fact that it is specific to combat damage. But if you, have the opportunity and you need to get to it faster, you need to find those, you can bring it in. I think personally, if I was building this deck, I wouldn't use those. Maybe I would take those out for a 3rd copy of each Acolyte. I'm not terribly sure, but we're going to play a couple of sideboard games here in a minute. In the other videos you'll check out. And we're going to play a couple sideboard games and see what they go. I feel like, 8 is a lot, and just 10 total of those enchants seems like overkill. I know it's a really great thing, but it seems a bit much to me. Maybe that's That's personal opinion. Someone could feel free to agree to disagree. But we're going to check this all out here. So hopefully that gives you a pretty good idea of the deck. If you're just seeing this again on YouTube, go check out the article on puremtgo.com. It's got deck lists, and the other videos will be all in one article and all in one place there as well. So what we're going to do is something a little different actually this time around. We're going to put up 2 live games with sideboarding, and then we are going to do a third video, which is me kind of blowing through a couple of replays, just in case. What happens with the live plays, and why I hate doing them, is the fact that, especially when they're match games, they can take forever, and people don't care to watch those, and they'll see the time length on those videos and say, screw this, I don't want to see it. So this week we're going to cover both grounds. We're going to have 2 live plays with the sideboarding options, which will be interesting because I think sideboarding is my weakest thing as a Magic player. But we will also have a third video. The third video this week will be a couple of replays that I go through. So hope you check them all out. Hope you enjoy it.